The formation of Scandinavian kingdoms intertwined history with sagas. This is why we have different, sometimes conflicting, versions of these events. This explanation mixes facts with legends, so determining absolute truth isn't always possible. The Viking Age was a turning point for Scandinavia. Vikings brought back immense wealth from raids on many countries. They also traded with those they didn't plunder, further enriching Scandinavia. Local chieftains and jarls gained significant resources. Now they could do more than just rule small territories. They were able to conquer vast lands and establish their own kingdoms. One ruler was the semi-legendary Halfdan the Black, king of Vestfold. We mostly know about him from sagas, which give very limited details. It's known he waged a long war against King Gandalf of Alfheim over the small kingdom of Vingolmark. Neither Halfdan nor Gandalf won, so the small kingdom was split between them. As afterward, Halfdan traveled to the Norwegian highlands. By conquering local small kingdoms there, he became one of Norway's most powerful rulers. Had wealthy lands and resources to continue conquests, with a powerful fleet and strong army. Even so, in the winter of 860, Halfdan the Black drowned in a lake returning from a feast. His son Harald was only 10 years old, and neighboring rulers planned to divide his lands. The first to invade Vestfold were King Gandalf's forces. Harald's uncle, Guthur M. Sigurdsson, stepped in for the young king. First, he defeated the invading army on land, then at sea, and eventually conquered Alfheim. As a thank you, Harald appointed him governor Jarl of Oppland. Harald became known by two nicknames, Lufa and Harfagri. According to one saga, he wanted to court Princess Gyda, King Erik of Hordaland's daughter. She refused, calling him a petty king. Harald then vowed to become ruler of all Norway and pledged not to cut his hair until he achieved this. That's how he got the nickname Lufa, and later, when king and cut his hair, he was called Harfagri. There are many traditions and several sagas about Harald Fairhair, each telling events a bit differently. A clear example is the story of the small kingdom of Svolde. According to one source, Harald inherited it from his maternal grandfather, Harald Goldenbeard. Another says Harald's half-brother, with the same name, inherited it but died young, and it passed to Halfdan, then Harald. All sagas agree that Harald Fairhair kept his word. 866 he conquered Vermland, and in 870 marched north through Norway via Trondelag, Jämtland, Namdalen, and Hålogaland, chose an overland mountain route instead of sea, defeating King Greiting in the Battle of Orkdal. Harald's campaign was clearly successful. When he reached Namdalen, the local king, Gerlog, took his own life to avoid fighting Harald. The young king easily subdued the region through force and diplomacy, also secured the lands of Jarl Haakon the Old, ruler of the Trondheim Fjord. One account says Harald first tried to defeat him in battle but failed, so he made Haakon his ally, married Haakon's daughter, gave him land, and appointed him Lady Jarl, governor of the north. Another version says Harald didn't fight any wars, immediately made Haakon Lady Jarl and married his daughter, valuing the Jarl's wisdom and generosity. Around the same time, Harald had a conflict with Jarl Atli the Slender, governor under the king of Svolde. Two opposing versions of this exist. One describes Atli as a harsh ruler who withheld royal taxes. The other portrays him as just, defending the people when royal warriors began looting. In both versions, Harald asked Haakon the Old to handle Atli. Both Jarls died in battle. Having gained his father-in-law's fleet, Harald continued to subjugate Norway. In the Mora region, he defeated combined local armies in two battles near Solsnes Island. Granted conquered lands to his ally, Jarl Rognvald the Powerful, whose sister he also married. From then on, Harald the Thick-Haired, also known as Lufa, became Norway's most powerful konung, ruling from Elva River to Finnmark. Harald's growing power caught the attention of rulers in western Norway. King Erik, whose daughter Harald had courted, began gathering forces against him. He was supported by King Tjotva of Agder, King Sulki of Rogaland, and Jarls Guthherder and Groldrig. Learning of this, Harald marched to confront them in 872. The naval battle of Hoppersfjord, Erik and Sulki were killed, and Tjotva fled. Harald triumphed and became the first king of a united Norway. According to the sagas, after 10 years of warfare, Harald Fairhair ruled Norway for 60 years. After Norway's unification, Harald focused on consolidating his kingdom. The main threat came from independent Viking bands with their fleets. They were not eager to submit to royal authority. Under Harald, no sea voyage could be undertaken without royal permission. Such travels were mostly led by his sons. Other Vikings were expelled from the country. Many migrated to newly discovered Iceland, where they founded colonies. Others fled to the British Isles and lands ruled by Vikings, from where they continued raids. These raids weren't just on other countries, but also against Norway itself. In response, Harald Fairhair assembled a fleet and led a campaign in 875, plundering the Danelaw. Meanwhile, his ally Jarl Rognvald the Powerful conquered smaller islands and was appointed governor. His descendants became the ruling dynasty of the former Norse island kingdoms. These realms, formerly part of Norway, acted as separate entities. According to folklore, Harald Fairhair had 20 sons. It's unclear if they were all biologically his or attributed later to strengthen claims. Of these sons, the most famous was Erik Bloodaxe. In his youth raiding coasts, he gained a reputation as a ruthless, successful Viking. After his father's death, Erik inherited the crown. As king, Erik was also cruel. He killed his brothers out of fear of betrayal. Only Haakon survived, having been sent to England as a hostage when young. 4 years later, Norwegians grew tired of Erik's tyranny and expelled him. Haakon became king. Unlike his brother, King Haakon was thoughtful, generous, earning the title the Good. He issued Norway's first codified law collection. According to Norwegian sagas, Haakon was Christian and tried to convert Norwegians but was unsuccessful. Harald's successes caught the attention of other Scandinavian kings, who began their own conquests. Denmark, the idea of a single ruler started to take shape, with kings calling themselves kings of all the Danes. However, it's unclear if they actually ruled all of Denmark or if this was attributed later. Some Danish kings are mentioned in European chronicles, including Gudfred, Helge, Horik, Harald, and others. They all entered history as ruthless raiders of the Frankish Empire's coasts. That's precisely why they appear in those chronicles. Of course, the most famous among legendary Danish kings was Ragnar Lodbrok, the very image of a Viking. Raided England and Francia and even laid siege to Paris. His fame in Scandinavia was so great that nearly every king claimed descent from Ragnar Lodbrok. Even Harald Fairhair was, according to some sagas, considered his descendant. Among others, a semi-legendary king named Hardecnud claimed descent from Ragnar through his son Sigurd Snake in the Eye. In his youth, Hardecnud lost his ancestral lands. Seized by Swedish Viking Olaf, the young Hardecnud went into exile in Norway. Around the year 917 he returned to Denmark. He served under King Sigtrygg, who ruled northern Jutland. But almost immediately he rose in rebellion and took his territories. Hardecnud settled in Jelling, ruled there for 30 years, and founded the Knutlinga dynasty. Hardecnud's son, Gorm the Old, could also have been seen as a king of legend and saga. Nonetheless, he had a runestone erected in memory of his wife after her death. This is one of the key pieces of evidence confirming his real historical existence. Gorm continued his father's legacy of conquest. Unexpectedly, he received help from the German king Henry the Fowler. In 934, Henry invaded Denmark and, in the Battle of Hedeby, defeated Olaf's son, King Gnupa. This greatly weakened Gnupa, and Gorm was able to drive him out of Jutland. From then on, Gorm ruled jointly with his son, Harald Bluetooth. While commanding his father's forces, Harald conquered not only the Danish islands but also the province of Scania. Thus, Gorm and Harald became kings of all Denmark. Even then, Harald leaned toward Christianity, allowing churches to be built in his lands. In the year 965, Harald Bluetooth baptized his kingdom. According to some legends, Harald did this to avoid giving German Emperor Otto the Great a reason for war. According to others, it happened after the emperor invaded, and the Danes lost their wealthy port at Hedeby. There is also a tale about the missionary Popo, who convinced the Danish king to convert to Christianity by holding a red-hot iron in his hands without being harmed. The Danish king also had ambitions for Norway. As early as 961, he gave troops to Harald Greycloak, son of Erik Bloodaxe, so that he could reclaim Norway from his uncle Haakon the Good. At the Battle of Fitjar, Harald Greycloak and his brothers defeated their uncle. The Norwegian king died in the battle, and Harald Greycloak became the new ruler of Norway. Soon afterward, Harald Bluetooth managed to win over late Jarl Haakon Sigurdsson to his side, whose father had been burned alive by the new Norwegian king. In 970, Jarl Haakon lured his king to Denmark to a meeting with Harald Bluetooth. There, the Norwegian king was killed. Norway was divided. Harald Bluetooth received the lands of Viken, while the rest was ruled by Haakon Sigurdsson, who paid tribute to the Danish king. Harald tried several times to retake Hedeby. In 974 he even managed to capture it, but when Emperor Otto II launched a campaign, the Germans retook the city and plundered all of Jutland. Only in 983, when German control in the region weakened due to a revolt of the Palavian Slavs, were the Danes able to reclaim the wealthy port. In 985, Harald Bluetooth decided to try the same tactic with the Swedes. He gave refuge to Sturvjorn the Strong, the nephew of the Swedish king Erik, and provided him with troops to fight his uncle. Erik was a renowned warrior, said in the Sagas to be descended from the semi-legendary Viking Bjorn Ironside. Erik met the Danish-backed army on the plain near the Swedish capital of Uppsala. In this battle, Erik triumphed and earned the epithet the Victorious. He also managed to extend his power southward by conquering the land of the Yates, becoming the first Swedish king to rule both the Swedes and the Yates. Though here too, different versions exist. In the sagas of the island of Gotland, it is claimed that already in the 9th century, after ongoing wars with the Swedes, in which the Gotlanders always emerged victorious, they voluntarily submitted to the kings of Svolde in exchange for their laws and customs remaining untouched. Still, most scholars are skeptical of this version of Gotland's history, considering it a 13th century invention to legitimize the island's self-rule. Toward the end of Harald Bluetooth's reign, his own son, Sweyn Forkbeard, rose against him in 986. Several legends attempt to explain why. One tells that Harald, wanting to erect a runestone in honor of his father, harnessed Danes like oxen to drag the stone into place, an act that deeply offended the common people. They rose up alongside Sweyn. Another version says that Sweyn opposed the Christianization of Denmark, destroyed churches in Zealand, defeated the royal army, and killed his father. But due to this, Danish Christians came to hate the new ruler, forcing him into exile and leaving him wandering in foreign lands for 14 years. European chronicles claim that palace intrigue forced King Harald to march against his son. The king lost and fled to the Viking stronghold of Jomsvikings, where he died of his wounds. When Sweyn Forkbeard became king of Denmark, the late Jarl Haakon Sigurdsson stopped paying tribute. The Danish king then hired the Jomsvikings to raid Norway. Their fleet was defeated, and the Norwegians ceased tribute payments. In 994, Swedish King Erik the Victorious invaded Denmark. This time, Sweyn waited for the Swedish king's death and a year later reclaimed his kingdom. Olaf Tryggvason was the great-grandson of Harald Fairhair. He spent his youth in exile outside of Norway. He first lived in Rus, where he served as a mercenary for Prince Volodymyr the Great. Later, in 982, he gathered his own band of Vikings and settled in the Baltic. There he earned fame for his raids. After pillaging the region, he headed west, married the widow of the King of Dublin, and ruled that kingdom. When rumors of Olaf Tryggvason reached Norway, local ruler Jarl Haakon Sigurdsson sent a spy to kill him. Instead, the spy befriended Olaf and urged him to return to his homeland. While Olaf was sailing to Norway, the Norwegians revolted against Jarl Haakon and welcomed Olaf as their new king. Olaf Tryggvason founded the city of Nidaros and made it his capital. He was also a Christian and attempted to convert Norway, although he didn't fully complete the task. After retaking eastern Norway from the Danes, he quarreled with Sweyn Forkbeard. Sweyn then allied with Swedish King Olaf, son of Erik the Victorious. In the year 1000, as Olaf Tryggvason returned from the Baltic Sea, they ambushed and destroyed his fleet at the Battle of Svolde. The Norwegian king perished in the battle. After this, Norway was divided among its neighbors. Some lands like Viken to Denmark and Vermland to Sweden came under direct control. The rest, northern Norway under Svein Haakonsson and western Norway under Erik Haakonsson, were ruled by the sons of Jarl Haakon Sigurdsson on behalf of the Danish and Swedish kings. Both kings became even more powerful after this victory. Olaf moved his capital to Sigtuna. There he began minting his own coins and became the first Swedish ruler to issue money. Olaf collected taxes in these metal coins, which is why the Swedes nicknamed him Skutkonung, since coins were commonly carried in a pocket, called a skuta in Old Swedish. The name Skutkonung literally meant coin king or king of the pocket. Olaf also became the first Christian king of Sweden and began introducing the new religion in his lands. Yet, even by the end of the 11th century, pagans remained a significant political force in Sweden. Sweyn Forkbeard, whose sister had been killed in England, set out to conquer the island kingdom. The conquest dragged on, and it was his son, Knut, who finally brought it to an end. For his victories, Knut earned the epithet the Great. While Knut fought in England, Denmark was ruled by his younger brother Harald II, who died in 1018 under mysterious circumstances. And so, Denmark also passed to Knut the Great. Olaf Haraldsson was the godson of Olaf Tryggvason and a descendant of Harald Fairhair. He spent his youth in exile, joining a band of Jomsvikings. He raided the lands of the Baltic, Frisia, and England. Before long, he gathered his own band of Vikings and settled in Normandy, where he converted to Christianity. When he learned that Knut had taken his army to conquer England, Olaf set sail to reclaim Norway from the Danes. He easily took western Norway and captured the young Jarl Haakon Eriksson through cunning. Upon arriving in Viken, the local Norwegians overthrew the Danish governors and proclaimed Olaf their king. When Svein Haakonsson learned of Olaf's arrival, he gathered a fleet and sailed to fight him. Yet, at the Battle of Nesjar, Sweyn was defeated and fled Norway. The entire kingdom now came under Olaf's control. To strengthen his power, he made peace with the Swedish king Olaf Skutkonung. This peace was meant to be sealed by the marriage of Olaf to the Swedish princess Ingejord, though she was instead married to Jaroslav the Wise of Rus. To maintain the peace, Skutkonung gave Olaf his illegitimate daughter in marriage. Thus, Sweden and Norway secured peace in 1019. The new king was a zealous Christian and promoted the faith both peacefully and by force. The Norwegian nobility opposed this coercion and appealed to the Danish king Knut for help. In 1026, Knut led a fleet and defeated the combined Norwegian-Swedish fleet at the mouth of the Helgea River. Olaf fled to Rus, and by 1028, Knut had conquered all of Norway. He did not impose the Christian faith, so Norway remained largely pagan. In 1029, Olaf returned to Sweden and got military help from his brother-in-law, Anund Jakob. He crossed the mountains and invaded Norway. Near Stiklestad, he ran into the pagan Jarl's forces. Even though they were outnumbered 3-1, Olaf decided to fight and was killed. It seemed like Norway would now stay under Danish rule forever. However, Olaf's death had a bigger impact on Norwegian history than his actual reign. News of his death spread throughout the kingdom, starting a rebellion against the Danes. Olaf was declared a saint. Christian missionaries started portraying him as a good king unfairly martyred by pagans, greatly speeding up the Christianization of Norway. By 1035, after the death of Canute the Great, the Norwegian Jarl Einar Tambarskjellfir traveled to Rus. There he found Olaf's illegitimate son, 11-year-old Magnus, and brought him back to Norway. Einar easily kicked out the Danes and made Magnus king, ruling the kingdom as his regent. Around this time, Einar also added the Faroe Islands to Norway. The local Jarl, Leifr Ossarsson, swore loyalty to Magnus, though the islands remained pretty much independent. In 1037, Magnus met the new Danish king, Hardecnud, and made peace. They agreed that if one of them died, the other would inherit his lands. When Magnus became an adult, he became known among Norwegians for his fair rule and his care for the common people, earning the nickname, the Good. In 1042, after Hardecnud died, Magnus traveled to Denmark and was crowned king. From there, in 1043, he led an attack against Jomsvikings, a Viking stronghold at the mouth of the Vistula that acted like a pirate republic. Magnus destroyed the city, ending the largest Viking warband. That same year, the Palavian Slavs invaded Denmark to loot the kingdom, but Magnus defeated them at the Battle of Lurskov Heath. Later, he sent letters to the English king, threatening to invade England, which he thought was rightfully his. Knut the Great's nephew, Sweyn Estridsson, first recognized Magnus the Good as his king, but soon he started a rebellion against him, and lost. He tried several more times to remove Magnus from the Danish throne but failed, and was forced to hide in Sweden. There he found an ally, Magnus's uncle, Harald Sigurdsson. After Saint Olaf was defeated, his half-brother, the young Harald, ran away from Norway. At first, he found safety in Rus and became a mercenary. But when he tried to marry Prince Yaroslav the Wise's daughter, he argued with him and sailed to Byzantium. There he served in the Varangian Guard, the most famous troops of the empire. Harald stood out in many battles and even led the guard for a while. In 1043, with lots of treasure, he returned to Rus and finally married Yaroslav's daughter. After a failed campaign against Byzantium, he sailed to Scandinavia. Having joined forces with Sweyn Estridsson, he started fighting against Magnus the Good. Then Magnus, trying to win over his uncle, made peace with him and agreed to split Norway, though Magnus's longtime ally Einar Tambarskjellfir advised against it. The very next year, King Magnus died under mysterious circumstances. According to legend, he fell from a horse that got scared by a hare. Soon after, Harald arranged for Einar Tambarskjellfir to be murdered while he was hunting, and took over all of Norway. Einar's death caused a rebellion among the Norwegians, but Harald cruelly put it down. During his reign, Harald was known for his schemes, cruelty, and tyranny. That's why he was nicknamed Hardrada, meaning stern or harsh. He moved the capital of Norway to the newly built Oslo, from where he ruled with an iron fist. While Harald was securing his control over Norway, Sweyn Estridsson took over Denmark and made it separate from Norway. This angered Harald. Using Magnus's legacy, he claimed the Danish throne. In 1050, Harald went to Denmark and destroyed the siege Hedeby. On his way back, he also looted Aarhus. After that, Harald raided Denmark multiple times. During one of these looting trips, on his way home, Harald Hardrada met Sweyn near the mouth of the Nissa River. Over 400 longships were involved in the battle. It became one of the biggest in Scandinavian history, and ended with a victory for the Norwegian King Harald. Sweyn barely escaped, fleeing the battle. Despite Sweyn Estridsson's defeat, the Danes didn't want the cruel Harald as their king, and none of the Danish jarls swore loyalty to the Norwegian king. Furthermore, the influential Norwegian jarl Haakon Ivarsøen started a rebellion against Harald. But in the battle near Lake Vänern, he was defeated and fled first to Sweden and then to Denmark, where he served under King Sweyn. The war wore out both kingdoms. In 1064, Harald and Sweyn agreed to a truce. The Norwegian king responded to the insult from Jarl Haakon Ivarsson by attacking his lands in Viken and Uppland. After this, Harald often used terror against his own people. In 1066, Harald Hardrada began a campaign to England, trying to claim its crown. The Norwegians suffered a terrible defeat at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. There, the king himself was killed. His son Olaf, who didn't fight in the battle, survived and returned to Norway, becoming king. At first he ruled with his younger brother, and from 1069 alone. Unlike his father, Olaf chose a peaceful way. He made reforms, boosted trade, and brought in new laws. Because of this, he was given the nickname the Peaceful. Sweyn Estrithson's rule was also quite peaceful. Denmark was no longer fighting wars of conquest, though Sweyn often sent troops to help his allies. Sweyn Estrithson actually had as many as 15 sons. Them Shltok, named Swines, participated and died in the First Crusade. Another 5 sons of Sweyn went on to become kings of Denmark, each taking over the throne after the other. The most famous among them was King Knut IV. He took the throne in 1080 and planned to conquer England, just like Knut the Great had done once. To do this, he decided to gather a fleet of 1,000 ships. However, this became a huge burden for the Danes, who then revolted against him. Knut took refuge in a church, but the rebels found him and killed him right at the altar. He became a martyr and was later made a saint and the patron of Denmark. While Harald Hardrada and Sweyn Estrithson were fighting each other, in Sweden, King Anund Jakob passed away without any children. The new king became the illegitimate son of Olaf Gutkonung Imund, who was known as Imund the Old in Sweden. His son Anund died during a sea raiding expedition. So, after King Imund the Old died, the old semi-legendary dynasty from Uppsala came to an end. The new king was chosen from among Imund's in-laws, Jarl Stenkil, from western Jurtaland. Legend says that, like the Norwegian kings, he was a descendant of Harald Fairhair and belonged to the semi-legendary Yngling dynasty. He tried to make the kingdom more unified and promoted Christianity. After Stenkil died in 1066, a civil war broke out in Sweden. Many people who claimed to be kings appeared wanting to bring back paganism. Among them were the brothers Erik, Anund Gordska, and Haakon the Red. Nevertheless, Stenkil's son, Ing the Elder, was a skilled general and politician. By 1076, his forces had defeated all of these rivals. Following his father's example, King Ing continued the Christianization of Sweden, which caused a pagan rebellion among the Swedes in 1084. It quickly spread across Svealand, where a pagan named Blotsvein took control. In 1087, Ing the Elder marched into Svealand with his soldiers, surrounded Blotsvein in his own house, and set it on fire. After that, Inge ordered the destruction of the ancient pagan temple in Uppsala and had a Christian church built in its place. In this way, Sweden was united under one ruler. After Olaf the Peaceful died, his son Magnus II became the King of Norway. Like his grandfather Harald Hardrada, he aimed to achieve fame as a conqueror. After putting down another revolt by Norwegian jarls, he gathered an army for a campaign. In 1097, Magnus III set out to conquer the Kingdom of the Isles, territories ruled by Scandinavian settlers for whom the Viking Age had not yet ended. Within a year, the Norwegian king had taken control of these islands one by one. In 1098, he forced the Scottish king to surrender his claims to these islands. Magnus II arrived at the Isle of Man, captured its king Lagman Godridsson, and the Norwegians then controlled the distant island. Afterward, the Norwegian king reached the coast of Wales, defeating the forces of Norman earls who had invaded Gwynedd, earning the right to inherit the Isle of Anglesey for this victory. Upon his return home, he started a war with the Swedish king Ing the Elder concerning border territories. This war did not lead to any shifts in the balance of power. A year later, the Danish king Erik the Good volunteered to mediate peace talks. All 3 kings met in Kungahella. During this meeting, a peace treaty was formed between the Scandinavian kingdoms, and the borders of the 3 nations were officially acknowledged. Consequently, these 3 kingdoms appeared on the map of Europe. Future conflicts awaited them, such as civil wars and disputes amongst themselves. They would unite and separate again, but they would never disappear from the historical scene.